You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mock,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is... Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Renee Nickell on the show with me today. She has an amazing book. It's called Always My Hero: The Road to Hope and Healing Following My Brother's Death in Afghanistan. And this is a phenomenal memoir that I think will hit a lot of people just right at home. Thank you for writing this book, and thank you for joining me today, Renee.
Thank you so much for having me.
Renee, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Oh boy. Probably, well, I can't pinpoint an exact point, but probably somewhere in my 20s, I felt like I had experienced enough impactful moments in my life that I knew I wanted to write a book someday. But it wasn't until my 30s when my brother was killed that suddenly that became my purpose.
So were you a bookish kid? Did you read a lot when you were a kid?
I did not. Matter of fact, I hated English. I did not enjoy reading. When I started going to college and writing papers, I realized I had something. I was like, well, I keep getting A's on these papers, and it sort of was easy to me, coming up with words and just, formulating text. And then I just started writing more and more papers, and I was like, I kind of like this whole college writing paper thing. And then when I wrote my brother's eulogy, which we'll get into, I gave it to my mother, and she read it, and she was like, wow, Renee, you really have a gift. And that was, I was 34 years old at that point. So I say it's never too late to start.
Well, it's never too late, and we all have different journeys. Writing comes to us at different times, and usually just when we need it. And some people, never can remember a time when they didn't want to write a book, and some people have a very vivid, bisecting line. This was my life before I was a writer, and this was my life after, and right. All of those are valid. After I graduated from high school, my life it started. I got married and I had a kid, and we joined the Air Force. And so life was happening, and I didn't really think about writing a book. I mean, it would be, I talked to my husband and I would say, one day I'm going to write a book. And he would smile and nod and say, yeah, honey, you should do it. But it was just kind of one of those, I knew I always wanted to write a book. I never knew really what the context would be. Nonfiction, fiction, all of that stuff was it was a whole different world to me. Yeah. So where did you grow up?
I kind of grew up all over. I was born on an army base in Virginia, Fort Belvoir. And then when I was 2, we moved to the mountains of Pennsylvania outside Harrisburg. And I was there. Those are my most impactful memories. When I was 10, we moved to North Carolina. And then my last 2 years of high school, I lived in Florida with my mom. So, I had moved all over. And then once we joined the military, it was constant moving. So home for me, I would say Pennsylvania is home. That's where I love going back to.
Gotcha. Renee, I'm getting a lot of background noise. Some like and sounds like that. Any idea what might be causing that?
I have no idea. I'm not I'm not on my headset, but I will try to be cognizant of.
Sure. No, I just want it to be the best experience we can be. So growing up in Pennsylvania and being an Army brat, for to use a term that we throw around sometimes, do you feel like that those experiences and those places where you were affected you in the kind of writer that you became? Can you place those experiences kind of in the context of how you write and approach story now?
Well, my father got out of the Army when I was about 2 years old. So I don't really have memory of an upbringing in the military. Now, I did have a very military family, grandparents, uncles, of course, my dad, and then my brother going into the Marines. But most of my the way I want to tell stories is my own experience being a military wife and experiencing military life firsthand. So that's what I feel is important to bring the reader.
So tell us a little bit about your brother. Was it just the two of you guys growing up? Were you the only siblings in the family?
My brother and I have half siblings. They're much younger than us, but primarily it was my brother and I growing up together in Pennsylvania. And then when we were about 10, my sister was born. So my brother and I are 2 years apart. And then, we moved to North Carolina after that. So our younger years were mainly just the two of us growing up. So and we were just close.
Yeah, I have a sister who is a year and a half older than I am, and I remember those years. Before 10, we were just thick as thieves. We were into everything together, and troublemakers together, and little angels together. The whole the whole gamut. Are you older, or was Sam older?
Sam was older. We were the classic 80s Latchkey Kids.
Oh, yeah.
We were home alone at, 5 and 7 years old and living in the mountains, we just, everything was a playground. We were just constantly outside and getting into trouble, catching snakes, bringing home all kinds of critters. And it was great.
So did you remain close to Sam as you guys got older and family, you begin to have your own family, and I know you and your husband, he joined the Air Force and you guys kind of moved away. What did you and Sam do to maintain a relationship?
We were always really close. Even through high school. He was just the big brother I always wanted to be around, and I was probably the annoying sister. And, but he was just always so kind and, very, very father figurely to me. Like he was just, that person who I always went to for moral support, or, he would kind of tell me off if I did something stupid. And then when he went off to college, we still maintained that closeness. It was really my brother who encouraged my husband to join the Air Force. We were a young family, early 20s. We were very poor. We were just broke, starting off with nothing. And we had a daughter, and she was 2 at the time. And so they started, my brother was just really encouraging, why don't you all go into, the service? And he was always an encouragement. So, he was always trying to find ways, to better somebody else. He was always like that with everybody. And then 9/11 hit. And I just remember sitting there on the edge of the bed, watching the Twin Towers fall. And my husband looks at me and he says, I'm going to join the military. Like that was the deciding factor. And I say the rest is history. So.
Wow. Was Sam already in the Marine Corps at that point?
He was. I mean, he knew since he was 5 years old that he wanted to be a fighter pilot. So he never let go of that goal. He went to college. He was in ROTC, and then was commissioned as an officer in the Marine Corps, and then went right to flight school. Wow. So Sam eventually wound up in Afghanistan. When did he go to Afghanistan in the beginning? His first tour was in Iraq as a pilot, and that was in 2003. And then he did another tour in Iraq in 2009. And then in 2011 is when he went to Afghanistan, and he had switched careers. He was actually an air combat controller when he went to Afghanistan, for his third tour.
Papyrus Author was designed and developed with the modern writer's needs, wishes, and preferences in mind. From big structures right down to tiny details, every single feature of our software has been carefully and meticulously crafted in collaboration with authors. Take charge of your writing with the author interface, which gives you access to different elements of your story, such as characters, backgrounds, and narrative structure. Move sections of your writing seamlessly in the navigator and evaluate the complexity of your text with our expert style and readability analysis. Never worry about losing progress with automated backups. With Papyrus Author, you can be your own writer, editor, and publisher. The world of writing is about to change. Papyrus Author, the word processor for authors, has arrived on the international stage. Unrivaled in its scope, it is the first software suite to unite every single step of creative writing. The vision behind Papyrus Author is to empower everyone with an idea to turn it into a great book for free. A word processing core that matured for over 10 years at its foundation, Papyrus Author goes beyond the text with its intuitive organizing layers for story, characters, notes, and research. The powerful style and readability analysis help raise manuscript quality. The inbuilt publication capabilities take the book directly to the reader with ebooks, docx, and print-ready PDF. Visit papyrusauthor.com to get started today. So I've known lots of people who have been deployed in some of these live action areas, Iraq and Afghanistan, and almost all of them have come back home. And of course, there have been lots of stories, around their experiences and things like that. But the rare occasion where you get the news that this person that you knew or someone you were related to didn't make it, and something awful happened, and they were one of the casualties that are not going to make it back home. When did you ever have a fear that and sadly, the time that we live in, and we've kind of had nonstop war for the last 20 years, is you get a little bit desensitized to this, sadly. But did you ever worry when he would be deployed and think, well, there's a chance that Sam won't make it back home?
Yeah, I never worried about him, and I maybe that sounds strange, but
no, I get it.
To me, my brother was so invincible. He had obtained every goal he ever set out, and he was just very determined. He was very smart. And, he used to tell me, he would say, Renee, I'm an officer. I'm not on the front lines. And so, and I think he maybe thinking back, maybe he told me that, so that I wouldn't worry about him. But I never worried about him crashing his plane. He had like superhero status to me. And my husband had a tour in Afghanistan in 2007. And I probably worried more about my husband than I did my brother. I just, and maybe that's because he was my husband and we had a family, sure. But, I remember when my mom called me that morning, and even through her hysterics on the phone, and I knew something had happened to my brother, but I just thought that he had been injured. Like, I couldn't even comprehend an idea that he could have been killed.
So we've all seen movies, and you have that scene where someone rings the doorbell and you open the door and there are a couple of officers standing there on the steps, and they bring you, the terrible news that there's been, something has happened to your loved one. Is that how it really happens? How do you go about getting that news?
That's the way it was supposed to happen, but somebody dropped the ball.
Oh, no.
So everybody is supposed to be notified at the exact same time. It's all supposed to be coordinated. And so my mother had actually left for work. I think she left at 7:30 in the morning her time and started driving down to Boca because she lives in South Florida. And the Marines showed up probably, 5-10 minutes after she left for work. But from my understanding is that they're supposed to show up, early morning hours to make sure that you haven't left for work already, and everything is supposed to be so well timed. And so they actually tried calling her when she was en route to work, and she didn't recognize the phone number, so she didn't answer. So it wasn't until she got to her office and my sister-in-law called and told her, and she said, "Mom, are you sitting down?" Mm-hmm. And that's how my mom found out that my brother had been killed. And so then she immediately called me. So I found out on the phone. So none of us had anybody there as support to find out, that kind of news. My sister-in-law did, of course. And then my father had left for work as well in North Carolina because my parents are divorced. So he had already left for work and had to turn around and come back to the house. So it was all very poorly coordinated. I would say our circumstance, they're not all that way, but
Sure. So when did this happen? How long ago was it?
This was 11 days before Christmas, December 14th of 2011.
Oh, man, so close to Christmas has to be. My wife's parents both died in November, and each year around Thanksgiving, there's still this kind of wet blanket, that hangs over for a few days. That I can only imagine being that close to Christmas, what that must feel like each year.
Yeah, it's we in August of 2011. I hear music playing. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I don't hear it.
We have 6 people in this family. So I'm usually, yelling, everybody leave me alone. I'm doing an interview, and, they know what that means. So in August of 2011, I told my husband, I said, I need to go down and see my brother in Florida because he was with the 4th Anglico in West Palm Beach. And I just had a very strong urgency to see him. And so we went down and we spent a week together. And so then he left for training in September. He had the Marine Corps ball in November. And that was the last time my mom saw him and said goodbye. And then we had Thanksgiving, and he tried to call us, but we didn't answer the phone. We missed the call. And actually my mom had missed the call as well. And then of course, 2 weeks later he was killed. So this whole time of year, probably from September to November, is subconsciously very hard. I usually have to, kind of pinpoint, like, why am I feeling like this? And then, I remember.
So from getting news like that to deciding to pour all of these thoughts and feelings into a book like Always My Hero, there's that doesn't happen immediately. You have to process these feelings and sit with them and deal with a lot of things yourself, and loved ones, and friends, God love them. They're usually, when something like this happens, there's usually a lot of people around for 3 or 4 days, and then people just don't know what to do anymore. They don't know how to help you. They don't know what sort of help to be, and it's very awkward for the person who's not grieving but loves the person who's grieving, because you just don't know what to do. Yeah. How did you work through this time, and when did you realize that this was a story that you needed to write down and to tell in that fashion?
I wrote about the story in the book, but it was probably about 4 months after my brother had been killed, and I started to go back to church. And I ran into, a friend, and she was asking how things were going. And I kind of said, I said, well, the whole family is sort of just falling apart. And she said, is that what's keeping you from moving on? And I was sitting there and I was thinking, well, I didn't even know what to say, because I'm like, well, how long is it supposed to take me to move on? And I'm like, here I am, 4 months after his death. And I was just starting to experience extreme depression and anxiety and panic attacks and suicidal ideations. And I'm thinking, am I supposed to be over this already? So when I started, the more and more that I realized that I was alone in my grief, not just as a person who experiences grief, but also as a sibling. The sibling is the most unrecognized family member in their grief. And I just, I knew I wanted to write a book. And I'm like right in the midst of my grief. And I did. I started writing, and I mean, it just would have been a nightmare. And I ended up deleting every single word I wrote. I wish I would have kept it, but I wish now that I would have kept it so that I would have had something to go back to. But I deleted it, and it wasn't until 6 years later that I revisited that, and that's when I really started writing.
So I'm always fascinated, Renee, with memoir, and because unlike a biography or an autobiography, a memoir tends to be a window into a time period. And we get to see your experience with a particular thing. Now, the topic of this book is something that's kind of obvious, but how did you decide what that window would be? Like, how did you know where the story began and ended?
Yeah, that was really difficult when I was planning and outlining the book. I knew I wanted to write a book that would give the reader an experience of who my brother was. So I really wanted to capture who he was as a child, our relationship as siblings. And then I wanted to take the reader through, all the way through his death. And because I felt like I wanted anybody who read our story to love my brother as much as I did and to feel the impact of his death. Because I felt Americans don't understand the sacrifice that military families endure. And I was like, if I can open that up and allow them to see who he was and the impact of that loss, and then as transparent and raw as I could, my grief and my healing journey afterwards, maybe then I can help somebody else. And so that's kind of how it started coming together. But as I was writing the book, I was also writing it because I knew one day I wanted to write the screenplay to it. And so I wrote it in a way that was very visual. for the reader, and as they read it, they could actually see it as a film. And that was the intent.
That's amazing that you had the forethought to think, to think in terms of this, may be interpreted as a screenplay one day, and how can I best shape the story, for that medium. That took a lot of forethought.
Yeah. Well, my thought process was not everybody reads books, but everybody goes to the movies. Everybody loves watching movies. And so I was like, well, how can I have more reach with his story? And I was like, well, let's try both. And so I've actually started to write the screenplay to it. And now I'm involved in film. And so I'm just kind of like getting my toes wet now in film production. And it's a crazy, journey that I'm on, but it's important.
Renee, I've heard you talk about the relationship that you had with, I believe it was an editor, a writing mentor of some sort, who encouraged you to write this book quickly. And, there's this idea that goes around that books take a year, 2 years, 3 years to put together, and every sentence needs to be, weighed and just really fretted over and all of this. And that's not always the case, is it? I mean, as we see from your book now, you wrote Always My Hero in like 3 or 4 months. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. 72,000 words. And the way she actually published my book. My friend Charity Bradshaw, she was my author coach, and she would just, she would call and text me and tell me that she needs, another several thousand words by this date. And she just kind of really held me accountable during the process. But in the beginning, when she told me, she said, I want this book done in 3 months. And I was like, are you crazy? I can't do that. I've been told it takes 18 months to even, just get the first copy down. And she said, no, she said, we're going to just rip the Band-Aid off. She was like, do you want to extend your grief? That really painful living for 18 months. So she said, let's just get it done in 3 months. And it was incredibly painful. I had to revisit a lot of things that I hadn't looked at for a long time. And then just going through the process of interviewing people who knew him and gaining all these stories, it was therapy in itself. And I'm really, really glad that, I had her, come alongside me to do that.
Well, Renee, you said that you attempted to write this book several years ago, and that you had to put it, in a desk drawer, so to speak, for a while, and then come back to it. What was the difference in this? When you sat down to revise and finish writing what we now have compared to that first experience? Was it just a matter of needing more time and more space, between the event, or was it a change in your mindset? What was it that was different this time?
I was a very, very angry person when I started writing it the first time. I had so much trauma attached to that first version. That's not, that I recognized it in myself that I wasn't ready. There was just so many things that I had to process and walk through. Years of therapy. The most helpful thing that I did was equine therapy. So I just, it's kind of like know your limits, and it's the self-awareness that I had, that I just knew that if I had put something out back then, I don't think it would have been helpful to anybody.
And having the wherewithal to recognize that is a big accomplishment, because there's been a lot of memoirs written and published that came out of that feeling, and I think some people believe that it probably would have been better served to give it some time and space. That's How did you know that it was the right time when you came back to it? What was it that let you know that you were at the right place, that you could tell the story now?
It was close relationships who had walked with me the entire journey. It was friends, very, very close friends, sitting at a dining room table and us, brainstorming an idea of a book and, and them knowing my story. And then, it was really one of my closest friends driving in a car with her. And it was actually in September of 2017. It was literally a month before I started writing the book when she was like, Renee, when are you going to write that book? And it just dawned on me. It was like a light bulb moment that I realized in myself that I was ready to write it. And then I immediately started researching publishing and writing books. I mean, I had no clue what to do or how to write a book. And, it was just full steam ahead at that point. So I think it was really my circle around me who recognized.
So in writer circles, there's this kind of debate about the two predominant camps between pantsers and plotters, and people that write by the seat of their pants and just tell the story as it comes to them, as opposed to the people that put out a very detailed plan in the beginning and then write to that plan. With a book that came about so quickly as this one did, first, do you consider yourself in one of those two camps, and do you feel like being in the camp that you were helped to keep this process moving along?
Yeah, I've definitely done both. I've written a lot of short stories and just, fly by the seat of my pants and just, just free writing and seeing what comes to me. But I am, that type A personality. I'm a planner. I love to see an outline in front of me. All my college papers had outlines, very, detailed outlines, and this book was no different. So when I took it to my author coach, it was a very rough outline. I knew very strongly about different times throughout our life that I wanted to include in the book, and she really just helped formulate some more ideas and organize my outline. And then once I had the outline done, it was, I would crank out a couple thousand words, before we left for church in the morning. I would be like, we can't leave. I got 2,000 words in me. So, yeah.
So Renee, the book "Always My Hero" is a great look into the life of not only your brother but you, and how you and your family dealt with this loss. When someone gets their hands on "Always My Hero," reads through it, and when they close that back cover, what do you hope they're left with?
I hope that they're left with hope and the belief that you can get through anything, and you can accomplish anything, and you can do anything. I'm a huge, huge believer that, the trauma that we experience throughout our life, while it does change us and shape us into who we are, it shouldn't be something that holds us back. And if we can find a way to use it, in a positive way, we can really impact, we can change the world. We can just really impact another person's life. And, I ended the book, even by saying that, if one person is changed by it, then it was worth it. And I still believe that today, and I have to remember that, that I've already accomplished that. I've already gotten the emails of people who have said that my book has changed them. And to me, that brings me so much joy knowing, that my brother's story and my story and the pain that I went through, was able to impact a reader in that way. and has been able to help them process their own trauma.
Well, the book is always my hero, The Road to Hope and Healing Following My Brother's Death in Afghanistan. We're going to put links to it in the show notes of this episode to help people easily find it. Renee, where can people find you online if they want to dig into all the great stuff that you do? I know you have a fantastic blog and stuff like that at your website. What's that address?
It's ReneeNickell.com. So it's ReneeNickell.com.
Excellent. We'll put links there as well. Renee, this has been such an honor to talk with you today. Thank you for taking time to come on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
The Novel Factory Online is software for the serious writer. With features like notes that are automatically organized, that means no more drowning in piles of paper, notes, or spending hours organizing digital folder structures. The Novel Factory offers clear, obvious structures for noting down information about plot, characters, locations, and everything else relating to your novel. Innovative features like the roadmap take you from concept to finished novel. The roadmap is an optional step-by-step guide to writing a novel that takes you from the premise to final manuscript and beyond. It draws on tried and true, tested theory that lies behind the majority of best-selling novels and blockbuster movies. Access your writing anywhere. The web version of the Novel Factory can be accessed anywhere you have internet. So you can write your novel on the train to work, while walking the dog, or climbing a mountain. Just log in and all your drafts and notes will be at your fingertips. Go to novel-writer.com to see how this powerful software can unleash your creative side. Use code HANK2020 for 20% off. That's the Novel Factory. Do you ever wonder if a person's critical thinking comes at the expense of their own happiness? Is it possible to be very happy and still practice excellent discernment? I used to wonder the same thing. Then I discovered the Trouble in Paradise podcast with Nigel Kent and Jasmine Starr, where they laugh as well as think about conspiracy theories and unexplained phenomena without ever getting bogged down in the age-old tug-of-war between logic and feeling. The Trouble in Paradise podcast is a joyful program for critical thinkers who have a sense of humor. Join Nigel and Jasmine as they probe the intriguing and wacky culture of odd occurrences, strange news, and ridiculous coincidences on this hilariously intelligent podcast. Trouble in Paradise on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Stitcher. Follow @Tipcast239 on Twitter. Trouble in Paradise with Nigel Ken and Jasmine Starr, a happy podcast for critical thinkers like you.